Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's NAMI Tennessee Facebook Live. As always, I am super excited that you're here. Here is the way this works. First, we have a super cool guest. He's coming up in a minute, but we have to do housekeeping first. So you can ask him any question you want. Just type it right in the comments. Keep your questions short because it makes it easier for me to moderate them over to him. But before we get to that, sign up for NAMI Tennessee's email list. That's how you can find out about cool things like the Facebook Live, the NAMI at Home series, and the very cool, awesome Saturdays with NAMI that's coming up on Saturday. We have a mentalist. He's gonna read your mind. It's right here on the NAMI Facebook pages. Just absolutely check it out. It's very, 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 very cool. But of course, if you were on the NAMI Tennessee email list, you'd already know that. So please sign up for that list. Sign up for the Saturday at Home with NAMI. It's very cool. It's a fundraiser. It's how we keep the lights on. So I hope that you will absolutely check it out. All right, that's enough of that. Kevin!
Hello, how are you?
I am well. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. I like this energy you have here.
Hey man, you gotta be like high energy. Like who wants to watch like a hi, welcome to NAMI? Like, yeah, we can't have that. We gotta be upbeat. Kevin Earley. Now, I know a lot of people at NAMI Tennessee know your dad. He's come a couple of times to speak. He bought his book, but he talks about you, but you're nowhere to be found. So we had to fix this. We want you to tell your own story. So my first question who is Kevin Earley?
Well, I'm the son of Pete Earley, who you may know through the book that he wrote that was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. In addition to that, I'm also the son of Barbara Hunter, that's my mother. And I'm an artist, I'm a social worker, I'm a musician. I just recently graduated from VCU with my master's in social work. I work as a peer support specialist, I'm a mental health advocate. And I paint, I make music, I do public speaking, I do all sorts of stuff.
You do it all. Now, you live with, if I'm not mistaken, a bipolar disorder, correct?
Yes.
So we're like twinsies. Look at that. 2 bipolars, 1 Facebook Live. That's really cool. It's gonna be exciting. I have a whole bunch of questions to get to, and of course the audience can ask questions as well. Remember, drop your short questions right into the comment section, and throughout the show we will pose them to Kevin and he will answer them. Let's start right away because it's right behind your shoulder there, Kevin. You said you were an artist. There is some art. Walk us through that. What is that art of? Is it mental health related? Does it help you with your recovery? Or is it just like, hey, buddy, it's a hobby and not everything has to do with living with mental illness?
Well, I think that my art isn't, if I do art, it is mental health related because I live with a mental health diagnosis and I made it. I like to paint portraits and I like portraiture. And I was watching a show about these Buddhist paintings, and I really got into iconography and painting Buddhas. So I like to paint the same thing over and over. In this case, a Buddha or a Buddha face, and that's one of my Buddhas in the background. And I just like to experiment with color, and it's very therapeutic for me to engage in the arts.
Now, I am familiar with This Is My Brave, and I think a lot of people at NAMI Tennessee are familiar with This Is My Brave. So I first became aware of you when you did a song for This Is My Brave. Is music and like painting, are those equivalents for you, or do they challenge different sections of your brain or help manage? And I don't know if manage is the right word, Kevin, so you can push back and give me different words, but do different types of art help you manage different parts of living with mental illness, or is it all part and parcel, just whatever strikes you?
Definitely. Well, there are 2 parts to the music. The first part is when I make it, it's a release of all these ideas and expressions out of me. And then when I listen to my own music, it's kind of like programming myself. Like if I'm going through something and I want a more positive outlook, I'll make a positive song, and by listening to it repeatedly, it'll kind of program into my psyche, and the lyrics get stuck there, and then I start thinking positively. So it's therapeutic and cathartic to make it, and it's therapeutic and cathartic to listen to it. And as far as the painting, that is also, I don't know if you saw that movie on Pixar called Soul, where you go into this artist zone and you kind of zone out the outside world. When I make music, when I make art, I'm in that zone. And if I sell it, if I don't sell it, that's not the concern. The concern is getting in that zone, healing, and making a piece of art.
I know this is a strange question. I just have to know, what's your favorite though? Do you have a favorite? Do you prefer to do music? Do you prefer to do painting? Or remember, I'm not an artist. I love it when I talk to artists because I know so little. My questions are always so incredibly rudimentary. And I think a lot of people who aren't artists they have trouble grasping this idea that it can help manage anything, right? And so many people are so dismissive of art. I mean, how often do we ask artists to work for free? So I'm very fascinated that you're doing art to manage mental illness, because that's a huge payday, right? You said you can't sell it, but you're living well and using art to live a better life. Like that's way more valuable than money.
Well, I mean, I can sell it, and I do sell my work, but I don't make a living off of it. But I'm not concerned about making a living. I'm more concerned about the living. I consider making the art the actual living that I'm doing. And if I make money off it, that's a plus, but that's not the main goal. But I would say in the last 5 years, I've been more heavy on the music than the visual art, even though I do the visual art too. I've got 3 albums coming out this year, and I released one last year. So I've been very heavy on the music recently, especially with the there's my website right there.
Yeah.
But also with the pandemic, I've finished my studies at VCU. I graduated, so I've had more downtime to actually focus on the music. And since I'm stuck at home all the time, I've just been making lots of music. So
let's talk about you. You just graduated. What was your degree in?
It was a master's in social work. So it was a 4-year program at VCU. I actually have a little card that I sent out here.
Nice.
Class of 2020.
Sweet.
So it was a 4-year program. It was all online. We would go in person about twice a semester. And I had an internship at a substance abuse facility, and I had an internship at an emergency services facility. But other than that, the rest of it was all online. And I have the lived experience, peer support side of the mental health equation. That's how I come into social work. And I don't want to leave that because I'm very passionate about not being in the medical model. But I wanted to have this in my back pocket. So if I get to be like 10, 15 years down the road and I want to branch out or something, I'll have that possibility. But I love being a peer, and I love how my role is not necessarily in the medical model, but I work with the clinicians and everything.
You know, Kevin, this is something that you and I have in common. We're both certified peer supporters. What we don't have in common is that I don't have a master's degree in social work. What have you noticed? I know a lot about being a certified peer supporter, but I know exactly this much about being a licensed social worker. Was there anything in your training in becoming a social worker that you thought was odd or weird or different compared to the training for being a peer supporter? Like, what was that like? Because like you said, on one hand, they're both the same. You're helping patients move forward, but they're very, very different treatment modalities.
Well, I've been working as a peer for 11 years. So I've been surrounded by clinicians for 11 years. So the world of clinicians was not new to me. I think when I first started as a peer, it was. But, you know, sometimes I had to remind myself not to let it influence me too much as a peer, because I know all the jargon they use, and I'm privy to conversations the clinicians have about clients when the clients aren't around. And sometimes I have to raise my voice and be like, well, you know, maybe they're going through this or going through that, but basically, I think that having a seat at the table and being able to be there challenges the status quo, makes them more accountable. And now I'm kind of not that I wasn't as an equal level as a peer, but I'm at a more equal level with the clinical background. But most of the social workers who I met, if they do say something about a client, it's not on purpose. It's just sort of, most of the social workers I meet are very nice people, and they're very committed to helping people out, and they're very sincere. That's one of the reasons I like working in this field, because the people have good hearts, and occasionally you come across people who are burnt out, but most people have good hearts and have good intentions.
I'm really glad that you said that, because there does seem to be I don't know if I'd call it a movement or a segment or maybe just a problem where it feels very much like it's peer supporters against practitioners, or peers against medical model, and on and on and on. And I feel very badly, because we should all be on the same side. And even if we're all on the same side, we still have this overwhelming fight. And the fact that we're fractured makes it difficult. Now that you are sort of on both sides, do you have any advice for peer supporters who are having issues or concerns or troubles with their practitioners? Because I hear from a lot of different people, and they're not all on the Kevin Earley, they have a good heart train. They're the enemy.
Yeah.
We got to get them all on the same page. What advice do you have?
My advice would be to seek other peers in your area, network with other peers if there are any in your area, network with them and build relationships with them so that you have allies in your corner. There's strength in number, there's power in number. If you have concerns that you're not in a good work environment, I happen to be in a good work environment, so maybe that's why I might be a little, I've been fortunate to be surrounded by social workers with good hearts. But if I wasn't in that environment, I would seek out help from other peers and vent with them, or raise my concerns with them, or even raise it with the supervisor who you work with. But just keep advocating for yourself and advocating for what you feel and know is right.
I like how you said work with other peers and vent. I think that sometimes we don't realize that, venting is healthy, but publicly venting is damaging. And I think that's sort of what gets missed. I mean, I complain about my boss all the time. I'll be the first to admit it, but I don't complain about my boss at work.
Yeah. We need a safe space where you can non-judgmentally because sometimes it might just be a petty gripe that you need to just get off your chest, but it means a lot to you, but it could be misconstrued if the wrong person were to hear it. So if you're in a safe, supportive place where people have your best interest in mind and you can load and get it out of you, then you can reset and center yourself and go back to work the next day.
I like that. I like that a lot. Kevin, we have our first question, and it comes to us from Rachel, and she says, how do we get more peers at the table?
Well, when I started in Fairfax County, and there was only a handful of people who were peer supporters. So I know that the work I did as a peer kind of made it more acceptable for the county to feel comfortable hiring other peers. So I think trailblazing is one way to get peers at the table. So showing up to work, and even if you do feel disparaged or you feel like you're not making a difference, I know that something I've kind of been conflicted about has been policing in this country. As somebody who's been tasered by police and been arrested by police because of crisis I've been in with a mental health issue, I started talking to the police to kind of bridge that divide and open their minds and hearts to how they can better operate with the mental health community. And with everything that was going on with policing in the news and in our world last year, I felt a little discouraged about it. But then I turned on a news story about an individual who had been tasered by police in Fairfax County where I used to work. And I saw the response of the chief of police, who I had a personal relationship with, and how he was very intolerant of his staff for their behavior in tasering this gentleman who got tasered, and how there were swift repercussions on this officer for tasering this individual. And I just thought that the years of speaking to the police and trying to meet them, even though I had been tasered too, I thought that it had helped contribute to a better environment at the police. I know he got a lot of pushback from the police because he was a big mental health advocate, and he was doing things to include CIT training. I know there was some pushback from the officers on the force. They thought he was kind of soft on mental health. But I know part of that was because of influence that I had. And I feel that being a trailblazer, even if you're the only one in your county or your area who is doing these things, you got to remember you're laying groundwork for people who follow you. And you may only lay a couple bricks here, but someone will build on top of those bricks and lay more bricks. And then pretty soon you got a building being erected.
One of the things that I was, when I got started 10, 12 years ago, there weren't a lot of us. And now there's still not a lot of us, but significantly more than a decade ago. And I've been surprised at the number of people that have said to me, I wasn't going to do it, but then I saw you, Gabe, and I thought, well, you can do it. Now, I'm assuming that's a compliment, but I know what they meant. It's very hard to be the first anything. I think, the Kevin Earleys of the world, publicly speaking out, doing the CIT, admitting that you were conflicted. I think that some people believe that they can't get involved because they disagree with something. And like what you just said there, I was conflicted, working with the police. I've got some issues. I don't know what to do. Some people believe that they can't be advocates unless they're like 100% positive. And that's not really the reality, right? This is messy.
You got to be authentic. So you got to be real. You got to be yourself. And some days you're not going to, want to deal with the police. You're not going to, but you got to be real about it. Just, I was very emotional when I saw all the protests. I went to some protests last year, and I have some friends who are, in the camp where they don't want to see police at all, and they want to defund the police. And I go back and forth with, am I doing good by talking to them? Is it detrimental talking to them? Like, what's the best thing to do? So I wrestle with it, but I'm real that I wrestle with it. And it's something that I think just being authentic and being yourself, and you're not going to be sunshine and positive every day, but the people you work with will see that you're authentic, and they'll get that from you.
I think that I have this thing that I tell people, like, people can smell BS a mile away.
Yeah.
If you're going to tell your story publicly, we even talk about it, I was a producer for This Is My Brave. Kevin are you still on the board? I knew you were for a while.
I was for a while. I knew Jennifer Marshall before This Is My Brave. We used to be in the same support group together.
Oh, nice.
So that's how I actually met her. So I was on for a while, and then I had to leave when I started school because I just didn't have the time to contribute to it, and it's just blown up. I'm just amazed at the organization's become.
This Is My Brave as an organization. Before COVID, before the pandemic, they put on live shows. They had anywhere from 15 to 20 performers, and they each got 5 minutes. And the performances were all over. I was in one, and I did a 5-minute speech. I did an open letter to bipolar disorder. Kevin was in it. He sang a song. I believe he sang a couple of songs, right? If I'm
just one. I did a rap song. Yeah.
And of course, there's dancers, speakers, poetry. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. But the one big thing that everybody gets told is that, don't embellish, don't lie, don't add, just be who you are. And yeah, maybe somebody won't like you, but you'll connect with the person who has a similar experience, and that person won't feel so alone. Part of the issue I think that we sometimes have in peer support is we want to like puff out our chests and try to move the needle forward by force. it's unfortunately more of a finesse thing, I think, which sort of leads me into our next question. Rachel, thank you. You're killing it today. How do we combat the stigma that the peer perspective is lesser than the clinician one? Because the general public really likes the clinician perspective and not so much the peer one.
Oh, that's a tough question. I would say that that's something I think every peer supporter works with, is bias, where you feel like you may not be as valued, or your perspective may be dismissed because of your lived experience, or because you don't have credentials, or you don't have a degree, or you don't have the paperwork. Even though I have a degree, being in school, I had doubts that I could finish school because of my diagnosis. So it took a long time to get to the point where I am now, where I was actually able to finish it. But I think the way we can combat the stigma is by rising to the occasion and showing them through our actions, and kind of the proof is in the pudding. So kind of showing them, like, look, I can hold down this job. I can make I can contribute to this field in a way that can't be denied. When you see the results with the clients, well, I say that word because I'm around clinicians all the time. So I apologize if that offends anybody when I say clients. It's just kind of ingrained in my head. But the clients that I serve, I've got clients, consumers. I don't know what the proper term is, but
it's different everywhere. That's the
different everywhere.
Doing it nationally, depending on where you are. It's peers, consumers, clients, clinicians, patients.
Yeah. The individuals I serve, I have some who have been completely written off. Nobody thought they could reach them. Then I'll go in there and I'll work with them for a few months, and then all of a sudden that bridge is built, and then they're getting services, and they're showing up, and they're coming to meetings, and their changes are happening. And not every individual you meet with is a success story. Unfortunately, there are days when things happen that aren't positive. People reoffend, or I've had some individuals I've worked with who've completed suicide, and that's horrible. That's like the worst nightmare. But the ones who succeed, who go back to school, who get employment, who contribute to society, the ones who just are doing better just waking up and getting out of bed. They don't necessarily have to get a job or contribute to society, but they're able to live their best life that's best for them. Just seeing that happen is more than any paycheck could ever mean anything to me. Just seeing and having that connection with an individual where they say, you've helped influence my life to do this or to do that.
One of the things that I hear a lot is that comparing peer support to clinical support, or peer supporters to clinicians, it is sort of like comparing, like pizza to dessert. Yeah, they're both food. They both, and maybe in a complete meal you'll have, pizza and then, pie. But why are we comparing them? They're unique in the space. It's a different skill set. It's different. Do you feel that maybe some of the confusion is that people think in their minds that peer supporters are supposed to do the identical things as clinicians, when in actuality, clinicians and peers have very separate roles with very separate skill sets to accomplish very different tasks?
I think part of the issue is when you start as a peer, when I started, I was the first peer on the team that I was working at. So I kind of had to invent my role. And you're around clinicians, so I wasn't around that many other peers, and it kind of influences you. So, you start saying words like clients, and you're like, oh, I got to type notes. I got to behave like a clinician. So it rubs off on, I can't deny that it rubs off on you. But you got to remember there's something that is unique about being a peer, that there's a wisdom beyond the book smart or going to school, and the truth is a lot of clinicians are peers themselves, and they just aren't upfront about it. A lot of, that's their decision. I've had a lot of clinicians privately tell me, I struggled with this, or I struggled with this, or my brother had this, or my family member had this, and that's why I got into this field. So I think, I mean, the beauty of being a peer is that a peer can be anyone. There's no qualification like you have to go to school or you have to get a degree or you have to come from this background. You know, that I think that, and a peer doesn't have that hierarchical standpoint when you're talking about clinicians and peers may be higher or lower than each other. When I'm meeting a peer to an individual, there's no me up here and them down here. You know, we're eye to eye, and I'm with them. I'm not there to lecture them or tell them what to do or scold them, or, you know, maybe I can inspire them or lift them up, but I'm seeing them eye to eye, and I'm just listening to them and just vibing with them and relating to them.
I've always been fascinated at the whole debate, you know, peers versus clinicians, and it shows me that there's just a profound misunderstanding. It just, could you imagine if like a couple of carpenters sat around and argued over like which tool was better? Well, I like the jigsaw. Well, I like the table saw. And somebody back there that's really in the know would be like, we're not limiting you to one tool.
Whatever gets the results.
Yeah, just use all the tools.
Yeah, there's some people I work with who they don't vibe with me, and I mean, it hurts my ego. Of course, I'm a human, but you know, maybe they like a clinician better, or maybe their psychiatrist helps them better. But you know, there's some people who they'll open up to me in a way that I'll refer something to the. I had a case where I had a individual I served who was really into rap music, but he wouldn't really vibe with his case manager. And the case manager knew that I love rap music too. So I met with him. I was like, why don't we take him to a studio, have him record some rap music, and maybe he'll open up. And he didn't say like any word during the drive to the studio. You know, he barely talked. Then he gets in the recording booth and all this stuff comes out and his personality shines. And I brought the CD and I gave it to the case manager. And she listened to it and she's like, who is this person? I didn't know this person had this personality and all these thoughts and all these dreams and these hopes. And it's just sort of, you know, that's the beauty of peer support. It's outside the box way of doing things that build that bridge. So when we have that bridge built, then a clinician can come in and be like, hey, like, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about doing this? Or can I get you this service? I can get you housing. Can I get you Social Security, you know?
Right. You know, once that is the, I think that's the biggest advantage of a peer supporter is we can say things like, we have been where you are. We understand what you are going through. Again, on the premise that it's true, we don't, you know, again, smell BS a mile away. But once again, I go back to my original analogy of carpenters arguing about which tool they're allowed to have. And a reasonable person would be like, you're allowed to have all the tools.
Yeah.
Nobody is saying you have to replace your psychiatrist, your psychologist, your therapist, your case manager with a peer support. No, you can have all of them.
Yeah. And use all of them too.
Yeah.
You don't have to just use one tool. You can use the whole toolbox.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So my next question is, we've gotten a few folks that, of course, have talked about your dad's book. Your dad's book has had a profound impact on me. Thanks for allowing him to share your story. And, of course, what's it like to have so many people know you from your dad's book? I am fascinated. I have told my entire story myself. I became an advocate and said, my name is Gabe Howard. I live with bipolar disorder. So anything that anybody knows, they have heard from pretty much my mouth. But your story is different. Your father wrote a Pulitzer nominated book about your experience. What's that like?
It's at the point now where I can laugh about it. It took me a long time to actually read it. When it came out, I think I skimmed it. I think I skimmed the parts that were about me, but I wasn't at the point in my recovery where I was able to really engage with it. And then I read it maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. I actually sat down and I was mature enough where I could actually read the entire book. But he uses a pseudonym. He uses my middle name. So when I started doing public speaking, I was like, I'm not ashamed to have a mental illness. You know, I may be ashamed of some of the things that I might have done or my behavior when I was mentally ill. I mean, I'm still mentally ill, but when I was in the depths of my psychosis, there are things I wish I could take back. But even those things I learned and I grew from them. So if we're going to be about, there's no shame in mental illness, then we can't hide behind a pseudonym. So, I got to be like, that's my name. And I find that talking about things that you're not supposed to talk about, you're afraid to talk about them. But when you talk about them, you realize other people feel the same way, and they'll come up to you and be like, hey, I went through the same thing. And it kind of challenges the societal norms that would make us afraid and shamed. And when you have shame and you're afraid to talk about something, it just festers inside you and it builds up inside you, and it's not healthy. So I'm just like, yeah, this is my life. This is what I went through. And a funny story, I was actually in grad school, and my professor was like, we were talking about bipolar, and my professor was like, you should read this book. It's called Crazy by Pete Earley. And I sent her a message. I was like, yeah, that's about me.
That's awesome.
Like, that's my dad. He wrote that. And she's like, oh, wow.
Oh, excuse me. Kevin, is there anything in the book that your dad got wrong? Is there anything that you read and you're like, all right, now I'm not trying to make like the next holiday awkward, but is there anything that, like from your perspective was different, or that you want to clear the record on? Any behind the scenes?
I don't have it in front of me, but I would say there are probably things that he remembers differently than I do. But I wouldn't say I was the most reliable witness during that period of my life. I was pretty erratic and emotional, and I was pretty out there. So I don't know if I would have been a reliable witness. And it's been so long since those things have happened. I mean, my initial arrest was in 2002, so that's 19 years ago. And I've grown and changed so much in 19 years that I don't even recognize. Now I'll look at photos of myself from back then and be like, it's a completely different person almost. The direction my life has gone. So
I think that's just such an incredibly mature thing for somebody, living with and managing mental illness. Like, that's a recovery statement right there, right? Like, well, I don't agree with that, but I acknowledge that I probably saw things differently, and maybe I wasn't in the best position to reliably see what happened. I was much like you. When people tell me I did things, I would be like, I don't remember it that way at all. You're wrong. And then as I matured in my recovery, I'm like, I don't remember it that way, but yeah, I had a lot going on. I think that's a recovery step in my opinion.
Well, I always say if you wanna hear my dad's side of the story, you read the book. When you hear my side of the story, you listen to my music. So
I like it. Now that's actually a very interesting question, though. Are all of your songs about different things that have happened to you, or are they all love songs? Like, what's the inspiration for? I mean, I know you said it's part of your recovery, but they still don't have to be about mental illness. Are they about?
No, but I think even if I write a song that isn't about mental illness, because of my experience, it kind of is. So, I mean, I could write a song about the rain falling outside and it'd be about rain, but it would also be about mental illness just because I wrote it and I had that lived experience in my life. So, I don't have to explicitly say this is a mental health song. I've done that in the past when I've worked with This Is My Brave. I wrote a song specifically about mental health and about stigma and challenging stigma and all that. And I like that song. I think it's a good song, but I don't need to be that literal with my work. I could write a song about love or about, police brutality or injustice, and it would still be a mental health song just because of my perspective is one of a person with mental health experience.
Is there a favorite song? Like, what is the title of your absolute favorite Kevin Earley song? Well, actually, I think I set you up incorrectly there, because is your stage name Kevin Earley? Like, if folks want to Google you and find you, you don't perform under the name Kevin Earley, do you?
No, I perform under the name Early Bird. You got to spell it correctly because there's a E before the Y. My last name is Early, and when I was a little kid, there was a kid in my neighborhood who used to call me Early Bird all the time because my last name's Early. And at first I hated it, and then I grew to love it, and it just stuck with me. That's what people called me. I had other rap names, but nobody wanted to call me them. They just kept calling me Early Bird. So that became my rap name when I started performing. So if you Google me or whatever, that's that's how you find me.
Can I get it right there? Early Bird with an E?
I usually do. Yeah, that's right. But I usually do it as one word.
Oh, hang on. I have all the magic control, Kevin. Hang on.
But there we go. I always say that my best work is my most recent work. And I released an album. I've got a whole bunch of music I've released in my life, but the last one I released came out in November, and the name of the album is Everything is Imaginary. And I talk about all sorts of topics, everything from police brutality to love to insomnia. I got a song about Dracula. So I cover all sorts of topics on that album, and I'm joined by my best friend's fiance. Sings on every song because I can't sing a lick. I can just rap. So she sings all the lyrics and the choruses for me. So I was very blessed to have her participation in the album too.
Very nice. Some folks are saying with a name like Early Bird, you're not allowed to be late to anything ever.
That's actually my friend whose fiance sings all the songs.
Nice, Kelly. Thank you.
Give him a shout out.
Are you late often? Is that?
I'm never late. I'm always like 20, 30 minutes early. People, it sometimes it's like a point of contention to people. I show up too early. So
I'm the exact same way. I don't know why I get nervous. Like it makes me anxious that I'm going to be late, and then I overcompensate by showing up really early.
Yeah. Well, if I show up late once, then I have to hear that joke where you're late early, and I hate hearing that joke. So
I love it. That's great. Hey, Kevin, let's go all the way back. Let's talk about 15-year-old Kevin Earley. You're hanging out, you're living your life, and you didn't know that any of this was going to happen. You didn't know that a book was going to be written about you that got national attention. You didn't know you were going to become a mental health advocate. Is this what you wanted to do? When you were 15, did you want to be did you want to be a musician and an artist? Did that come later? What did 15-year-old Kevin want to be when he grew up?
I wanted to be a comic book artist when I was 15. So I was always into the rap music, but I was really into comic books too, and I wanted to be a comic book artist. That was my plan when I went to art school. But when I went to art school, my horizons kind of broadened, and I saw there was more art besides just comic books. And that was also when my mental illness kind of kicked into high gear when I was in college. And so I had to deal. I like to say that in my 20s, I kind of lost a decade of my life because I was dealing with all this mental health stuff and this untreated mental illness that I was dealing with. And I had a lot of relationships and friendships that I had deteriorated because I wasn't treating my mental health. And, I've kind of put the train back on the tracks, and I'm able to live a successful, healthy life now. But it took a long time to get to that point.
It's a very, very slow process. Now, I'm not quite sure how to word this question. So if you don't understand it, please, say, Gabe, I have no idea what the heck you're saying. I will not be offended. But your situation is somewhat the same as mine in that, we both had like a public crisis. I ended up, in an inpatient hospital, et cetera. The difference is my dad, he's not even remotely famous. Nobody knows my dad's. I could tell you my dad's name and you would forget it immediately. Did this provide an extra layer of difficulty or protection? What was that like being, sort of a member of a prominent family when this happened? I think people are curious about this because on one hand, I can see how maybe it could help, but on the other hand, I could see how it could hurt.
I think both, but I think with my father, it had to do with our relationship. Our relationship is great now, but at the beginning of it, it was more hierarchical. So he wanted to be the father, and he wanted to be like, do this, take your meds. You know, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you following your treatment? And he wanted to kind of like bark orders at me. And I think that's the reason why it took me a while to read the book, because I felt like he was kind of trying to, by writing about the mental health stuff in Miami, it kind of felt to me like he was trying to scare me straight or something, like, you know, kind of like, this is what's going on in Miami, and if you don't get your act together, you'll end up like them. But we've both learned a lot on this journey, and now we're more partners. So it's not necessarily a hierarchical situation, even though when you're a father and son, there's always going to be, you know, a little bit of teasing or whatever, or a little combativeness. We're always going to bump heads just because we're father and son. But he learned how to be my partner and how to stand with me. And he tells a story during the speeches about how he used to hide the pills in my cereal. And I would come out to eat cereal, and I'd be like, why is there already milk in the cereal? And then I'd look at the milk, and I would see the crushed up Zyprexa tabs in there or something. And I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, you're trying to, like, hide my meds in my food or something. So he learned not to do that. And I also learned things that I was doing that were irritating him or pissing him off, and not to do them. And we kind of met in the middle ground. We both became partners in working towards me being healthy. But it took a lot of work to get to that point. I would say, as far as him being famous, I think it helped out in some situations. There was one point where I was going to be discharged from a hospital, and this is when Mike Wallace was still alive. And I think he called up the hospital and said he was going to have 60 minutes to do like an investigative report on the hospital or something crazy like that. And they decided to keep me like an extra like 11 days or something. So that helped him. But even with all the prestige and that he has to his name, there was only so far that goes when you're dealing with somebody who has serious mental illness. And, you know, you could have all the prestige and fame and money in the world, and you're still dealing with a debilitating mental illness. And I always look at it like, if the person who has the mental illness doesn't take some sort of ownership, it's not ever going to change. You could dress it up or put a Band-Aid on it, but if I didn't start to recover until I took personal ownership and responsibility and accountability and said, I want to change. I want to live a better life. I don't want to keep going in and out of the hospital every year, you know?
This is, it's a message that we try to get out there, and that I think that you and your father get out there very, very well. It has to be a partnership, because like you said, if the person experiencing the mental illness, living with the mental illness, isn't taking any ownership, then they're probably not going to be better for the long term, because you can't follow them around 24/7. That's where a partnership really comes in. And also, there is a relationship that you want to preserve. I relate a lot to the part of your story where you talk about being at odds with your father, you know, being at odds with your family. That's how it started out with me. You know, for a long time, I was like, well, my family sucks. I hate them. And then I realized, okay, we're all just sort of stuck on this sinking ship together. Nobody's bad, nobody's good. We're all just stuck. If we can figure out how to work together, you know, we can make the best of this situation and possibly move forward and get off the ship. So I'm always fascinated that, you know, like I said, my father's name you would not remember 2 seconds after I gave it to you, and your father was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, but our stories are identical. In every way. It doesn't matter where we're from, our socioeconomic class, education level, what we're doing, or whether or not we know Mike Wallace. Mental illness kicked our family's ass in exactly the same way. And I think more people need to understand that, because I think people think that what type of family they're from will protect them, and it won't.
No, it does not discriminate, you know?
Not in any way. I got another question from the audience for you. Barb Bowen asked, tell me one thing that the general public must know in order to move the conversation forward about mental illness.
I would say there's no shame in having a mental illness. And I think that there's more acceptance nowadays. I remember when I was first hospitalized, I mean, I'm very fortunate when I read material or watch documentaries about, the 50s or the 40s when people were being lobotomized, or, when they deinstitutionalized in the 70s. And I think about how difficult it must have been for that generation of people living with mental illness to kind of cope. And I thought it was difficult in the early 2000s when I went in the hospital. And I look at the next generation, and they are much more open to speaking about, talking about, supporting. It's not in the shadows as much as it was even 20 years ago. And I know that growing up, it was like a joke, you'd be, oh, they're a loon, they're crazy, something. It was much more stigmatized than it is now. So I think that there's always going to be people who aren't open-minded enough to understand that it can happen to anyone, and everybody has mental health, and everybody has to attend to their mental health, so nobody's immune from it. But those of us who do descend into madness in a way that I did, you can redeem yourself. You can build your life back up. It's not easy, but it can be done. And I think that's what people need to know.
Kevin, I could not agree with that more. We have another question that just popped up. Here we go from Laura. Do you have a favorite book about mental illness, but you can't use your father's?
I'm going to feel like an idiot saying that I haven't read that many. I'm trying to remember the last time I read a book about mental illness. I was reading a book today, but it wasn't necessarily about mental illness.
What's your favorite book that's not about mental illness?
I have a favorite quote about mental illness, and this is one of my favorite quotes, and it is it's by I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, but the quote is, "Insanity, a perfectly rational adjustment to an insane world."
I think my favorite mental illness quote is, what the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Yeah.
Along Laura's question, have you ever read the book An Unquiet Mind?
I've not. I might have read it like early on when I was sick, but I don't remember it. But I remember somebody in my family read it and recommended it to me.
It seems like
when I read other things, I live mental illness, so I don't necessarily want to read it like in my free time. I know the story. I know what happens when you have it. I know what it's like to lose friends and to suffer humiliation and go to the hospital and take the meds and gain the weight and all that. So I don't need to. I don't know. I did watch. I've watched some movies about mental illness that I've liked. So.
What's your favorite mental illness movie?
Silver Linings Playbook was really good, but my favorite would probably be Lars and the Real Girl, which is about Ryan Gosling who gets a sex doll and starts treating it like it's his girlfriend. And instead of shaming him or making fun of him, the whole community kind of rallies around and accepts him, and they start addressing the sex doll by her name. And they start treating her like a real person. And by the end of the movie, when he decides that he breaks up with the sex doll, they're all concerned and they're sad that he broke up with her. So I think that's a good metaphor for when somebody has a mental health crisis. You don't condemn them, you don't judge them, you rally around them, you support them, you make them feel comfortable, and you do what you need to do for them to kind of be healthy enough to leave that bad space that they were in.
I like that. What was the name of that movie again?
Lars and the Real Girl. It's got Ryan Gosling is in it, and he does an excellent portrayal. Like, he has the mannerisms down. I kind of felt like I was watching someone like me when I was watching that movie. He did a great job.
Wow, I've never heard of that movie, but it sounds very interesting. I will have to check that out. Lars and the Real Girl. Molly asks, who is your favorite rapper, musician? Who inspires your music?
Okay, this is a good question.
Yeah.
This changes like every day. Like every day, you ask me on Friday, I could have a different. I listen to so many different rappers. I'll say, as far as mental health, I was actually fortunate enough to be featured on this gentleman's album. I don't know if you can see that. But he put out an album in '97 called "A SWAT Healing Ritual." His name is The Witch Doctor, and I love his music. I became friends with him, and I was actually featured on this album that he released in 2007. And I really like his. He's one of my favorite musicians for as far as rap. As far as music, my two favorites are Daniel Johnston, who lived with serious mental illness and passed away 2 years ago. And if you look in the background, you can see I've got some Billie Holiday stuff, and I actually have a tattoo of Billie Holiday on my arm. She's my other favorite artist. I think she's just amazing human being. And Daniel Johnston, I feel the same way about him. So, but rappers, you could ask me on Monday, I could have a totally different rapper because I love every rapper pretty much.
That's very, very cool. We have one more question. I know we're nearing the end, but I'm trying to get them all out here from Rachel. Again, Rachel, thank you so much. You've been awesome. Mental illness, blessing or curse?
I would say it's both. It's a blessing and a curse. I mean, there are things about it that happened that humiliate me, that made me sad, that hurt other people. And that's not good, but the blessing is that I've been able to grow into a fully formed human being in spite of those things happening to me. And I can't go back and change the past, so the only thing I can do is just try to live a better future. So it's a blessing and it's a curse.
Kevin, I love that answer. We are almost out of time. I want to give you an opportunity to plug all of your stuff, and I can't.
Okay.
So I know that your website is, let me pop it up on the screen. It's getthatworm.com. Now, I'm assuming this is an early bird reference.
Yeah.
Tell us where to find your music, what's on your website, how folks can follow you. Give us the Kevin Earley tour.
All right, well, Get That Worm. If I was going to do Get the Worm, but you go there and you can buy bait and tackle, so it's for like fishermen. So I couldn't get that domain. So I went with Get That Worm. And my music is on Spotify. It's on Apple iTunes. It's on all the digital providers. If you go to my website, there's links on there there's a link on the main page to get the new album. I actually have a new single coming out on Friday, and I want to talk to you about it because it was one of the best experiences of my life. The name of the song is called Live from the Psych Ward, and it's a true story of what happened to me in 2018. I was invited to speak at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and after I gave my recovery speech, they actually invited me into the psych ward to speak to the patients, and I performed some songs to the patients. And it was the most moving performance I've ever been a part of. I didn't know how they would receive me, but I went in there and I rapped one of my songs. They got up, they started clapping, they started bobbing their heads. One of the guys was banging on the wall. And I wish there had been videotape of it, but I know because of the confidentiality of the people in that environment, it wouldn't have been possible. But I've basically moved to tears, and I think they were moved to tears hearing me inspire them. And they were rapping along to my lyrics, and the nurses in the psych unit were rapping along. And so I wrote a song about that experience, and that's coming out this Friday. So yeah, just follow me at Get That Worm, and my Instagram and Twitter, my handle is Bird Boogie, @Bird Boogie. If you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram.
I love it. I love it. Kevin, thank you so much. I want to give you the final word before we wrap up. Is there anything that we missed? Anything that you want to tell the NAMI Tennessee audience? Is there, anything?
I just want to say, I think it's important that as a society, when somebody is going through crisis or when somebody's being problematic or strange or weird or different, not to throw them away, not to write them off. You do have to establish boundaries for acceptable behavior, but within those boundaries, you need to set a path for redemption and healing for every member in our society, and especially members of our society who are marginalized, because I'm a white male, so there are certain things that might be easier for me because I'm a white male, and people who don't have the white male background, it might be a little harder for them. So we need to set these safe spaces for every member of our community.
I cannot agree with you more. Kevin, thank you so much. We really appreciated having you. You were absolutely awesome.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. All right, everybody, listen up. NAMI Tennessee is having a fundraiser on, how come I forgot the date? January 23rd. It just popped right back into my head. You are going to be amazed. Mentalist Sidney Friedman is awesome. He can literally read your mind. We weren't going to advertise it. We were just going to have him straight up email you, but we didn't want to freak everybody out. All you have to do is head over to namitn.org, and there's information on how to buy tickets there, or you can email info@namitn.org, and we'll write you back. All right, that's it. That's all we got. Thank you, everybody, and we hope to see you at the fundraiser on the 23rd with mentalist Sidney Friedman. See you later.